Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about my ranking of the best red herring slash decoy possibilities of a ghost face in the Scream franchise. So, like I said before, normally when people do their ranking of Scream, they normally do like favorite movie, favorite ghost face, probably favorite kill or something like that. But I want to be a little bit different, and I want to highlight some of the most important aspects or tropes in the Scream franchise and stuff. And one of those tropes or aspects is that of the red herrings. Red herrings are very, very crucial in the Scream franchise because just like Randy said, everybody's a suspect. However, there are some people in the Scream franchise that give off such a disturbing vibe that you automatically assume that they might be the killer. Now, when it comes to these red herrings, it varies. Sometimes they can barely appear in the franchise or whatever movie or show they're in. So sometimes it could be a few seconds, sometimes it can be a few minutes. Other times they can be, all throughout the movie and stuff. It really depends, but no matter what, they're always designed to throw you off. Now, there are a couple in the movie that sometimes there are like two, like take Scream 2. There are like at least three good possibilities that you might assume somebody might be that of the killer. I'm only gonna go with the most direct, the ones that had a pretty good like presence and overall good runtime of like the movie or like the television show. So like the sorority girls from like Scream 2 or the two mean bathroom girls from Scream 1 will not qualify. Also, because my memory of Scream 3, not 3, but my memory of Scream Season 3 of the television show is very like iffy and stuff, I'm gonna leave people out of that. Plus, I can't even think of who could be a possible red herring. So, and some of these, like, movies and stuff were kind of hard to figure out who could be a red herring. Because in Scream 1, I'm just thinking to myself, who could it be? Who could it be? Who could it be? And then I stopped and I thought about it. I'm like, oh, wait, that person was a red herring. You just have to remember the clues and everything. So in my opinion of the worst person who was like a red herring, so the person who comes at the very bottom of my list, only because I never for whatever reason suspected this person, is Randy Meeks. Why? And I know what you're thinking, like, was he really a red herring? Yeah, he was. So in the Scream movie, when Sydney gets her first phone call, for whatever reason, she assumes that it's Randy. And she assumes that throughout the entire phone call until the caller mentions her mom. Then she knows it's real. Then there's Tatum at the party. When Tatum was at the party, she assumed for whatever reason it was Randy dressed in a Halloween costume and trying to freak Sydney out. Why would she assume this? I have no idea. That tells me that off screen that maybe Randy is kind of like, he's such a weird, sketchy character, or he's a weird character that maybe he's a little sketchy and everything. You have to remember about Randy. He has tons of movie knowledge, but more importantly, he has tons of horror movie knowledge. And he's always rattling off like lines from movie or serial killers or certain plot details and that and this and that. That right there is the part of the red herring that makes him that of a suspect and puts him on this list. Then you have to remember the events of the movie. when he was at the party and everything. When he was at the party, at some point in time, the killer was going to stab him, but then decided not to because they heard Sydney screaming outside. And so that right there makes you think, okay, well, if this is the killer and he's not going to stab Randy, there's no way Randy could be the killer. And back then, we weren't thinking of like accomplices and everything. Then there is that strange scene when, like, after he gets knocked out by Gale, he's running with like a limp and holding his leg, making you think that somebody stabbed him in the leg. Did the actual killer actually stab him before he went to go try to get Sydney? And then, like, he freaks Sydney out, talking about we have to get on out of here. And she pulled a gun on him. And then it's him and Stu going back and forth, like, blaming one another. And so, at that point in time, it's kind of like, this is a little confusing. Because we know for a fact that Randy can't be the killer because the killer is about to stab Randy and everything. And so it has to probably be Stu and everything. So they did try to set up this whole possibility that Randy could be a possible, like, killer and everything. He has kind of a little bit of a sketchy look. He's dopey and everything. And he has that movie trivia, and he is obsessed with horror movies. And we know that the killer loves to ask people about what's your favorite horror movie. Well, at least with Casey Becker and stuff. Next on my list is George Willis. Now I know what you're saying. Who the heck is this? Well, he was in Scream 7 and he was Tatum's theater teacher and everything. And the thing about him is that partially he is a missed opportunity and stuff. See, the thing about him is that after like the first killing in town and Sydney and everybody else is outside and stuff, he gives Sydney the death stare. And he just gives her a nasty, nasty, nasty looking stare that makes you think, whoa, what's up with him? Like, could he possibly be a killer and everything? Then he's pretty harsh on that of Tatum in her acting. He tells her, you're no Sidney Prescott. You lack grit and like, and like an edge to you and stuff. Like, you need to tap into that stuff your mother taps into. And he was very disappointed in her. Now, the death stare is pretty much why he's a red herring. Because it was just too gruesome of a stare. However, the missed opportunity with him is Jessica's confession. She said she wanted to create a Sydney 2.0. Like go all the way back to the beginning and like recreate, not necessarily recreate things that happened with Sydney, but like everything that pretty much followed after that. Her being hunted down by Ghostface killers, her taking down the Ghostface killers, her becoming famous, her writing a book, her inspiring other people to not be a victim and everything. And so the thing about that is like, you can't have a 2.0 if there's still a 1.0 still around. So you have to get rid of Sydney, right? And so that's part of the reason, like, I'm like, okay, that death stare he gave her, could that possibly be him being all like, oh, I have to get rid of you so that your daughter can like take over your place? Also, not only that, but there's that key line from the trailer of like, your daughter was the exact same age you were when all this was happening. And I've been waiting this entire time. That threw a lot of fans off, especially myself, because that stopped and made us think that, hey, maybe, just maybe, this killer was in plain sight of Scream 1 the entire time, and we just never knew. It had to be somebody from Sydney's far, far, far past but it kind of was and it kind of was not. It technically was from Sydney's like Scream 4 past. And that happened over like a decade and like a half. And so, nobody was really thinking about like, Scream 4 and stuff and like, the book she wrote and stuff like that. So that threw people off, and that was a missed opportunity with the writing. I tell you that man who wrote that movie should never write another Scream movie. Anyway, but so yeah, if we would have known this before, like if we would have known that the reason why the killer is doing what the killer is doing is because they want to create a Sydney 2.0, and the teacher is all like, "Oh, you're nothing like your mom. You need to be more like your mom. You need that grit. You need that edge. You need that fire and everything." That would have been a perfect red herring and a perfect motive. I can't talk. Modem. Thinking about a computer. A perfect motive to be that of like the next Ghostface. Angelica from Scream 3. Angelica played the brand new Sydney in the Stab movies, replacing that of Tori Spelling, which till this day, Tori Spelling is still irritated by. And so, like, when it comes to her, you never really truly suspect her or really anybody else for that matter. Only because it's so campy, the movie is and stuff. But there are certain scenes that make you suspect that she could be the killer or the accomplice. So, when it comes to her, she's playing the new Sydney, right? And she's kind of shy, kind of meek, kind of quiet. And she also has a little bit of a perky side when she meets the real Sydney Prescott. So she says straight up that maybe the movie should like stop filming because people are dying in real life. And the guy who's playing the new Dewey's all like, "You better hope and pray this movie continues because you beat out all those other actresses." And I guess her acting's not very good, you know what I'm saying? And so like after the movie got canned, everybody's kind of just like, "Oh, let's just get together for one last time," right? And so the killer sends a fax. Now, I forget exactly what the killer says, but the killer said that it's going to kill one of them. And the killer says, I forget what the location where the killer says they're at. They're either, I think they said they're outside or something like that, right? And so Gail and Dewey's like, "Yo, let's leave and everything." And Angelica's like, "No, like we need to stay inside where it's safe." And Gail's all like, "If the killer says he's outside, then that means he wants us to stay inside for whatever reason." And so as they're all leaving, the fax machine beeps again. So she freaks out and she turns around. She's like, "No, I want to know who dies and blah, blah, blah. I want to know who the killer is going to kill," as they're trying to restrain her. So the dude who's playing the new Dewey in the Stab movies, he runs inside while everybody else is outside. And he reads the rest of the facts. And he says the one person who's going to die is the one who smells gas, which he had his lighter on, and then boom, there's like a giant explosion. So as they're all tumbling down the hill and everything, Ghostface comes out and tries to get Gale, and Dewey shoots Ghostface, but then Ghostface leaves and leaves a picture. And then next thing you know, you see Angelica coming out of nowhere from, I guess, like, part of the hill. And they're all like, "Where did you come from? I thought you was like down here already," or something like that. And so then she freaks out and say, Todd was in the house. And of course, the house exploded. Now, what makes you think that she could be the killer is, why in the world is she going to want to go back in the house and read that stupid fax, kind of luring somebody in, right? Then when she meets Sydney, she's like all like happy and gleeful because she gets to meet like, somebody she's a fan of that she's playing. And she kept some souvenirs from like, the movie, a ghost face mask and a buck knife. And so that made her look slightly suspicious, but you don't really know, right? Then there is the end of the movie when they're all celebrating that one director, no, that one producer guy's birthday. And she's all like, Milton, and she's all telling, I forget the black dude's name, Damon, I think. And she's all like, come on, we should like, look for him. It's spooky and blah, 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 and stuff like that. But then she's kind of acting weird and acting very unusual. Because before she was timid and shy. And now she's acting kind of suspicious and everything, right? And so, like, at some point in time, the killer's in the house, and then she freaks out and she starts running. And she's all like, she didn't like have sex with Milton, just to be the lead in the movie to a bunch of has-beens and everything. And then she's running out telling everybody it's not safe here, we need to leave. And then she gets like killed by the killer. And so it's kind of like, oh, okay, so she was a major red herring and everything. Now here's the thing. Originally, well, also here's the thing. Roman is the killer, right? Roman faked his death. And in order to fake his death, he has to have some pretty convincing special effect makeup type stuff on him. And a knife sticking out his chest. Many people and myself have speculated, how was he able to fake his death so convincingly and everything? And not only that, but how is he able to zip around town so freaking fast and everything? Like, it doesn't make no sense, especially in the climax of the third act, when he's in the house and he's pretending to be drunk and then pretending to be dead, and then Ghostface shows up. It makes you think he has an accomplice, but he's the only Ghostface to like do things solo. Many people have suspected that like maybe Angelica could have been his accomplice, and I think in an earlier draft she was the accomplice and stuff. Next is Kirby, of all people, from Scream 6. Now, Kirby first showed up in Scream 4 as a teenager in high school, and she got stabbed by the killer at the end of the movie, which many people assumed she was dead. But because she was a fan favorite, Kevin Williamson kept it in to where she could possibly return. 10 or 11 years later with Scream 5, there's a teeny tiny little article on or video like on YouTube that suggests she is alive and giving that interview. And it's a blink and you'll miss it kind of thing, but somehow eagle-eyed people was able to find it. So she missed the entirety of Scream 5. Then she pops up in Scream 6. And you have to stop and ask yourself, okay, you got stabbed. You survived, and you ain't been seen like on screen since like Scream 4, so that makes it kind of suspicious. What also makes it suspicious is that the new killer is collecting evidence from all the past murders and stuff and creating a shrine. It would have to take a huge movie buff to do that, and Kirby is a huge movie buff. Not only that, but how the heck did somebody go into police evidence locker rooms and storage rooms and get all the evidence? They would have to be a cop or working in a cop building. It's later revealed that Kirby works for the FBI, which I still find hard to believe, because she's only in her early 20s and crap. And so, like, it was just kind of weird. Like, okay, well, we have like our cop who can get into like the evidence place, who works for the FBI and gets all the evidence. And not only that, but she's been tracking down this new killer from Scream 6, the two killers who died early on in the opening movie. And so it's kind of like, is she trustworthy? Is she not? And also she suspects that Stu is still alive and everything. And this is something Kevin Williamson has also, left open and fumbled in Scream 7. And so, like, So it's kind of like, they bring up Stu and she thinks he's still alive because she know for a fact he is because she be working with him. Like, what's going on, you know? And then we later find out that she's either been suspended or something like that or let go from the FBI because she's so impulsive of trying to find the killer. So it really made it suspicious that, this huge movie buff and everything who survived the killings could have snapped and turned into a killer themselves. Also, she shaded Roman for being a solo killer. But it turns out she's not the killer and everything, or an accomplice. Judy Hicks from Scream 4. So she's a deputy. And she's really perky and bright and cheerful and all this and that. She likes Dewey and she hates Gail. And it kind of seems like she's trying to steal Dewey from Gail, which makes Gail jealous and everything. So the perkiness throws you off to where you think, okay, she can't be no killer, right? But then there's that one scene and that one scene only when she introduces herself to Sydney, and it is creepy like I don't know what. So, like, Sydney's at the house, and there's like a big old shadow way behind Sydney. And then slowly emerging from the shadow is Judy Hicks. And she has kind of like this odd look on her face. And she tells Sydney, "You don't remember me, do you? It's been a long time and everything." And it's kind of like, whoa, where's this going? Because we've never seen her before. Apparently, her and Sydney went to high school together. So technically, in universe, Judy has been there since Scream 1. And she talks about how, like, her and Sydney used to do plays together, and that, like, Sydney will always beat her for the roles that she wanted. Also, Sydney can't even remember who this girl is. So that makes you think, wait, hold up. She's creeping out the shadows. She's like a little upset that Sydney got all the roles that she wanted and stuff. And so that makes you think, okay, she's jealous, right? Then she's a cop. Who better to be a ghost face than somebody who can, like, throw the rest of the cops off their scent? Now, at that time, we never had a cop that was ghost face. That wouldn't happen until like 2 movies later. And so that one scene of her coming out the shadows and everything was just so creepy. And so it made me think for a second, could she be? You know what I'm saying? Next is Stavo from that of Scream, the television series, season 2. Gustavo, he's new in town. Now, the thing about him is that he's the don't judge a book by its cover. So basically with him is that he's new in town, he's dark, he's brooding, he likes to stay by himself, or hang out by himself. And he's always spying on the 6 survivors from season 1, which makes people suspicious when there's a new killer, and the new killer is going after all the people who survived in season 1. And so they really do set it up to make you think that, like, he could possibly be like a killer or something like that. Not to mention, he's always drawing like the 6 survivors, and he draws disturbing graphic nature type stuff. He's really into true crimes, murder mysteries, and psychopaths and everything, serial killers. So they really set it up to be kind of like, okay, he's the bad boy type, he's extremely suspicious. Some of the other characters suspect him as well, along with the police. And, but then it turns out he's not bad after all. It's just more like misunderstood. And then he develops a relationship with Brooke and everything. And then he turns out to be a pretty nice guy, but with a little bit of an edge to him. And so I thought this was a great misdirection and everything, you know? Like, he's brand new to the show. We know the six survivors. We know they're not the supposed killer, but then one of them turns out to be. And it's just one of those things that where he's a pretty good red herring, you know? Vince Snyder from that of Scream 5. So originally, I was gonna put Liv in this category because she was also a bit of a red herring as well. But I'm gonna save her for a different list, my Gail Weathers list and stuff. And there's a reason for that. So, Vince, boy, I tell you this right now. They straight up tried to make him look like the most suspicious person in the entire movie to the point where they overdid it. But that's the point, and it worked for a lot of people. First things first, he's Stu's nephew. And Stu, of course, is the killer, or one of the killers from the first movie. And it's kind of like, well, when did Stu ever have a sister? But this is when they started, also Scream 3 is when they started cramming in all these like mystery relatives and stuff. And so they just kept with that. And so he's his nephew. So you have to make you wonder, like, is he going to be disturbed? Is he not? Like, what's going to go on, you know? Then in the trailer, they let us know, hey, everything's going back to where it started. Stu Marker's house. The infamous party where the massacre happened in the first movie. This was huge. This was big. And so it makes you wonder, how is this going to pay off? You have Stu's house. You have Stu's nephew. Not to mention, the dude is shady like I don't know what. First things first, he worked with Tara and Liv, and he was in an underage relationship with Liv. Liv is a teenager in high school, and I'm pretty sure he's an adult. Not to mention, he's been kind of stalking her a little bit. He can't get over her, and he hates the idea she has a new boyfriend. He's angry, he's temperamental and everything. And when Dewey tried to break them up, he literally pulled a knife on Dewey. So that makes you see that, okay, something's wrong with this dude. Like, you know, but then everything gets thrown out like the window and everything because he's the first person to die in the movie. And it's just kind of like, he would have been a great killer and everything. But he's an even better red herring. So, Cotton Weary, in my opinion, is the definitive red herring. He was a red herring for two movies, the first two movies. In the first movie, we barely see him. All we see is just like video footage of him like getting inside a cop car. Then in the second movie, he made his real debut. And boy, it is memorable. The dude acts like he has a screw loose. And the actor, Lee Stryver, played him to perfection, to the point where you seriously thought he was either the killer or he's gonna hurt Sidney Prescott. Why? Because he was framed for the sexual assault and murder of Maureen Prescott, Sidney's mother. And he was on death row in the first movie. But after they found out it was Stu and Billy that killed her, they let him go. So you gotta stop and think. Dude's been in jail for at least a year or two, and he's probably pissed and wants some revenge, you know what I'm saying? Now here's the thing about him and Maureen. Sydney, when she woke up and found her mother dead, she saw somebody leave her house wearing Cotton Weary's hoodie or something like that. And so she assumed, okay, it was him. You know what I'm saying? And she's been saying for a full year he sexually assaulted her mother and then he killed her. But here's the thing about Maureen Prescott. She was never sexually assaulted that night she died. See, her and Cotton were lovers, and it was always consensual and everything. After like he banged her and everything, he left their place, but he left his hoodie. This is when Stu and Billy come in and they just straight up murder her, but they never sexually assaulted her. So all that like sexual assault stuff is because they found Cotton's DNA, well, all around and probably all up inside Maureen and everything. And it was consensual. And so, like, they had to frame him, but they had to make sure Sydney woke up. So one of them left and the other one put on the hoodie, and they made sure Sydney saw them from behind leaving the house. And so that's how he got framed and everything. And so in the second movie, he has, like I said before, a screw loose. He's jittery. He has a tick and everything. And he's very impulsive. He really, really wants Sydney, but he really wants her so he can have an interview with those two together so they can make tons of money on somebody's talk show. That's all he cares about, money and being famous. She wants nothing to do with him because of what, because she's just kind of freaked out about the whole thing. And of course, he might want some revenge, but he's way, way, way too impulsive, even to the point where Gail has to tell him, calm his behind down. But things get worse when he's in the library with her. And of course, as a decoy, he's even wearing a hoodie from the university she goes to, and he does not even go to school there. He is literally stalking her, and he literally corners her up against the wall to where the cops have to intervene. Then he gives this speech talking about, until you see me with a knife in my hand and blood all on me, I'm innocent and everything. And Gail even has to tell him, don't do nothing stupid, you know what I'm saying? And he's all like, I just want my 15 minutes of fame. But then there is the climactic ending. He comes in and he's trying to stop Mrs. Loomis from killing Sydney. And he has a gun. Now, the dude, like I said, has a screw loose. His hand shaking. He's acting nervous and everything. And Mrs. Loomis starts to talk some sense to him. She's all like, look, man, you went to prison and everything because she lied on you. And don't you want your revenge and blah, 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 blah. And at that moment, that look on his face of jitteriness, boy, it turned stone cold. And with the gun pointed at Sydney and everything, you stop and you wonder, is he gonna kill Sydney? Is he gonna throw everything away just to get some revenge and everything? Because Sydney won't give him that interview. But there at the last second, she's all like, fine, you can have your interview and everything. And so then he turns and he shoots the Mrs. Loomis. Now he tells Sydney he was never gonna harm her and everything, but do we really, truly, and honestly know that? You know what I'm saying? Because he was on the freaking edge. He lost everything because of Billy Stu and because of Sydney. And so he got what he wanted. Tons of news reporters wanted to give him an interview and talking about, it's going to be a price. And in the third movie, he became really famous and really rich. But he was never, ever the killer. This was Kevin Williamson at his best and everything. Because it's kind of like you wonder so much. You really truly think, okay, he's going to snap and he's going to go nuts and he's probably going to do something. But then again, you don't really truly know. And in my opinion, Cotton really was the best red herring, man. Some other ones were kind of weak. Some other ones were way too obvious and everything. But I felt like Cotton was just the perfection of a red herring. And in case you're wondering, who is this red-headed person, cartoon character? Well, that's Red Herring himself, my pup named Scooby-Doo. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.